Michael retired after 27 years of teaching at Portland Community College in 2015, where he taught political science at all of the campus. And he was also the co-director and chair of the Peace and Conflict Studies program at Portland Community College, which is the significant part of what I'm hoping he would share. Michael's also a Fulbright scholar. He went to India in 2010, and Michael talking about that is great too, because I was on a Fulbright tool, and you were on a Fulbright too, I think, right? I'm trying to remember. A few of us in the room have been in Fulbright.
Yes, I was on a Fulbright Hayes.
Fulbright
Right.
Hayes. Okay,
And I
Fulbright.
went to South Africa.
Okay, so that's all relevant. Michael can talk about his experiences. His publications relate mostly to Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Frantz Fanon, and issues regarding violence, social change, and nonviolence. He holds a PhD in political science from the University of Minnesota and a BA with credits from Fisk University. And I always like personal stuff. He enjoys bicycling, vegetarian cooking, and multicultural experiences. He also likes to walk because almost every session we've been having Michael and he's on a walk, which is great. So Michael, I'm turning it over to you. I'm going to turn my mic off. So you've got the room.
Well, thank you. It's great to see some of you. I'm working from my smartphone and I can't see all of you unless I flip through, right? So I see Paul still has his hand up because I'm on his page. On the other hand, I won't be able to see your hand going up. So I want to treat this as a friendly, well, seminar as it is. And if I can't see you and you have a question, I want you to feel free to unmute yourselves and appropriately wait for me to take a pause and then ask the question right away. In my classrooms, I liked interruptions. It's good to take the interest where the interest flows, in my view. And so I'd like this to not be a boring presentation, but an interactive one. If you want to be passive, you can wait until the end to ask questions, and that's just fine. I even have a slide for that. And I even created slides for this, but I'm low tech. And so, for example, this is the first slide. A cover page. I'll warn you in advance that I have about 30 of these and I plan to go through them fairly fast, some of them. But again, if you interrupt me, we can take some time. And I would like that. And I suspect more questions will be generated from the next 40 minutes than can be answered. So I am very grateful in advance for David's clairvoyant organization of us having time in our last hour together to cover what we want, because that'll take a lot of stress off me. Thank you. So let me just go ahead and get started a little, and feel free to take screenshots when you like. I am from Portland Community College. Portland Community College is in Portland, Oregon. And I am in now my 35th year of being here in some capacity. There's always a next step. I can say that from experience. I'm going to share with you a brief overview of the Peace and Conflict Studies program as I helped to create it back in 1988 to 90. And the various incarnations it has had as a program over the year, at least 5 stages. I believe we may still be the oldest Peace and Conflict Studies program in the United States at a community college. And we still exist, which is part of the reason why I entitled this, Building Peace and Conflict Studies Programs to Last. Portland Community College, as a way of giving a context, is currently the 12th largest community college out of over 1,000 in the United States. Currently, we have 60,000 students on 4 campuses. a total of 4,000 plus employees, a budget of over $440 million per year. We're big. And when we established the Peace and Conflict Studies program, we hoped that that would help promote a rippling effect nationwide. And I think it might have had a small ripple. I'm currently a trustee at Portland Community College. It's a whole additional story. But bottom line is, I helped oversee all of the programs at this institution, which is now, again, the 12th largest in the United States. So what do I want to do here? You can take a screenshot of this if you want to keep it and follow what I'm doing for the next 35 minutes. This is a presentation outline. I'm hoping you can see the whole thing. There's the formative period and its challenges, the early years and its challenges, years of renewal and continuity, always challenges, building this visibility and expanding community, and then building to last. Now, I don't want to go through the challenges carefully and meticulously, but this can be a lot of reason for future questions or interruptions during this next 30 minutes. In the early years, cultivating basic support, addressing the bias issue, creating basically terminology, what is peace, curriculum issues, how to structure the program, creating the core course, and it required a lot of patience, and patience was a real challenge. In the early years, it was a struggle to maintain momentum. There was such energy put into the formative period, it felt like we needed to relax a little, and we did. But we hosted conferences, we evolved from a task force for learning community, we developed a focus award program because certificates, the state of Oregon declared, could only be for vocational programs, not programs like ours. Between 1995 and 2006, there were multiple program revisions. We converted most of our courses from 3 to 4 credits. We created a capstone seminar, and we engaged in cross-listing the core course and the seminar. And that might be of interest to some of you because it was a very important strategic move so as to be able to allow enrollments. In a period of declining enrollments, it helps a lot to be able to take the core Peace and Conflict Studies course for either political science, sociology, or economics credit. And it also allows for instructors in those 3 disciplines to teach the core course. You can see how there would be great advantages to that in declining enrollments. And in fact, the core course is cross-disciplinary, and this is a totally honest way to do things. During the period of 2006, 2015, we engaged in free speech forums. I'll give you some examples of them, but that was a very important way of promoting the existence of the course and of the program to the larger college community and to the public. We had a weekly forum on a controversial subject, weekly, every week for 15 years on one campus or another. This helped us to network with a lot of speakers and others that we brought on campus. It certainly enriched our capacity to have speakers in our courses. And there was a tremendous, during this time, proliferation of focus awards. The Peace and Conflict Studies program was the first focus award, cross-disciplinary program. Then came women's studies, and then came Black studies, Latino studies, Chinese studies, Asian studies, international studies, environmental studies also has a focus award program. As we'll get into that, but as you can imagine, faculty got into other programs and created them. That gave a lot less energy for us to maintain the Peace and Conflict Studies program. And then, and last but not least, I think it's important to struggle with how to carry the torch and pass it on. What do you do with declining student enrollments? Portland Community Colleges have gone from 90,000 students 10 years ago to now 60,000 students. We've dropped 1/3 of our student enrollment. And last and definitely not least, before I finish today, I'm going to ask and see if others of you are engaged in what is known as the Guided Pathways movement. It's a national movement which has positives, but I would suggest has a dramatically important structural danger that it poses to peace and conflict studies programs that don't easily fit into the new movement. This is a historical document from 1989. I found it as I was doing a little research for this presentation. Whoa, the curriculum committee has approved our proposed program. Now, this was no small thing. This was 2 years in the making. This was the original program. Mostly you'll see it's 3-credit courses. I'm hoping you can see this. I don't know for sure. But you can see that it was set up as a minimum of 27 hours. Pretty ambitious program where you need to take at least one course in each of 5 course categories. Notice that category 3 up there includes environmental and ecological peace and conflict. So from the very beginning, Portland Community College saw the need for an environmental focus, which at that time in 1990 was highly unusual. And I think we weren't clairvoyant, we just saw already a crisis in the works 30 years ago. That is, of course, now a climate emergency. This photo will be a nice contrast just to what you're seeing as my talking face right now. It's like we live different lives, don't we? Different stages of life are like different books. And here's a photo of me from 1990. "60 pounds lighter." Now, if your mics were off, I would hope that I could hear a laugh or two, but I'm not seeing much, so I'll move along. Most of what I think is funny, people don't find very funny. And so if you want to laugh at me rather than with me, that's all right. One of the first things we did in 1990 after we were approved, and it was a struggle to be approved. And if you have questions relating to that process, if you, for example, are in the process of trying to get a program approved yourself, we have a lot of lessons to share. But there was, at that time, the Peace Studies Association National, and we hosted the 2nd annual meeting at Portland Community College at our then brand new Peace Studies program. And I guess this is too small a print for you to easily see. And I'm sorry if this is boring for you to look at so many just prose. But you'll see that, among others, Betty Reardon was on the program. Betty Reardon from University of Colorado Boulder, who sometimes can be called the mother of peace studies programs in the United States, at least in the modern sense. It was a modest program, but we did manage to have about 200 people apply and come from around the United States. When you do that sort of thing, it really energizes your own program. So I had in mind both, I guess I should say, propagandizing peace studies within my very large community college to let them know that we were part of a nationwide network but also to encourage programs elsewhere to learn from our lessons. We had a local organization called the Peace and Conflict Studies Consortium. That carried on for the next 20 years and is largely now defunct. But I do encourage you to consider having regional consortiums where you have a network of support among other institutions within your proximity. At the high point, in around the year 2000, this consortium in Oregon included 7 different institutions, 3 community colleges and 4 major universities. And it was very good for us to communicate amongst ourselves, which also helped our students transfer from one place to the other. I included this slide only for the sake of David Smith.
All right, I am laughing. I am laughing because I think it's going to be funny, whatever you show.
Well, let's just say Building Cultures of Peace, academic conference hosted by the Oregon Peace and Conflict Studies Consortium, had as its one of its main featured speakers, whose name is right next to the Gandhi photo, David Smith.
That must have been like what,
Peace
2000
program officer.
2007, 2008? What was
This
it?
was 2006.
2006. Oh my gosh.
And I don't think David looked like Gandhi at the time, but
I'm getting close to that though. I just have to shave my beard, and you know, it may look. I might, yeah, good pass maybe.
Again, building relationships, which I hope we're doing in this seminar, is crucial to the success of us all. Because sooner or later, we all get discouraged. Sooner or later, we all need assistance. And if you have the connections, it's a lot easier to pull through. Well, this is an early incarnation of our basic brochure. You can see that it's homemade. And though the print is very small, I can send you a copy of this. You will notice that, I'll give you the photo, I'll give you the screen back if you want to try to take a screenshot. By the late 1990s, basically nearly 10 years into the program, we evolved it to have not 1, but 3 focus awards. We created a system where you could have a PAX 1, Peace and Conflict Studies 1 focus award with 18 credits. A PAX 2 focus award with 30, which is the equivalent of a minor at many colleges and universities, and a PAX 3 focus award with a minimum of 45 credits, which is the equivalent of a major. So you can see that at Portland Community College, we were expanding our vision to include basically a very simple level focus award, which would only require maybe 4 courses plus a seminar, a minor equivalent, and a major equivalent. And we kept the 5 categories, again, including peace, involving environmental and ecological peace and conflict. I can send these to you if you're interested. The core course, I'm not going to dwell upon. I have given entire seminars just on the core course and creating the core course. But this is one of the last times I taught it, back in 2014. The Peace and Conflict course, you can see, is cross-listed with political science or sociology credit. It is also set up on a point system with a midterm exam, final, 2 papers. You'll notice that that texts included Louis Fisher, Gandhi, Marge Piercy, Woman on the Edge of Time, and Simon Wiesenthal, The Sunflower. We didn't use a regular text. These were all paperback and inexpensive, and the structure of the course, which other instructors can use, is basically first you define your terms, then you get into a case study of a peacemaker. One, you have an in-depth discussion of Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Dorothy Day, or I suppose if it was a Republican teaching the course, you might have Henry Kissinger. We allowed up great flexibility, but you get into someone you consider a peacemaker with depth. And you look at that person's worldview. You look at that person's historical context, what they did. You analyze their strategies. The second part of the course required that we include a utopian vision. Women on the Edge of Time includes an alternative future society called Mattapoisett, set in current day Massachusetts, which is a highly decentralized androgynous society, which is extremely ecological. And the point was you could use any utopia, but the idea was to encourage the students to use their imaginations. What would Gandhi do there? What would Gandhi say about? What do you say about that? What would Martin Luther King do about living in 1984? Would there have to be a new movement? What difficulties would there be in creating a movement in 1984 or in Brave New World or whatever you wanted to choose? And the third part of the course included looking at case studies of actual nonviolent campaigns. In this case, we used a lot of selected excerpts from A Force More Powerful, which is somewhat dated, but still has really good case studies. And I was especially interested in the South African case study of overthrowing apartheid because I had lived in South Africa for a time, studying Gandhi and interviewing people who were still there who knew Gandhi. I chose a Nashville sit-in case study because I had been a student at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, shortly after those sit-ins took place. And I knew many of the people personally who had been in those sit-ins and organizing them. In any case, do what links to your experience. And I think the students are far more interested in carrying on and will be actively engaged. One of you earlier mentioned that there's always a challenge in getting speakers to come to your courses. Well, hey, I had my own students do the homework. One of my assignments for 20 years was a peace activist paper. Interview a person who has been active in promoting peace, resolving conflict on any level. Depending on your idea of what peace activism might include, a member of your family might qualify, or a friend, or a student in this course, a therapist, a military recruiter, an advocate of civil disobedience, a terrorist, or a cook in a church's soup kitchen. You interview the person, and then it's a structured assignment. What is the person's issue focus and why? Why are they serving meals in a soup kitchen? Were they homeless themselves? Had they experienced hunger themselves? What strategy or strategies does the interviewee use? In this case, they're serving food at a soup kitchen. But is there more than that? Do they recruit people to the soup kitchen? How do they get people to come to the soup kitchen? How do they get the church to volunteer to have the soup kitchen, right? And then last but not least, I asked, what do you have to say about your activist choice of issue and strategy? You, the student. Do you agree with their focus of concern for the homeless. Maybe your concern is domestic abuse, particularly of women. Why do you have that special focus? Briefly, what in your background encourages you to be concerned about abuse of women? What about strategy? How would your strategy compare to this soup kitchen activist? And so I encourage you to create assignments in your courses like that. I kept the title page of each and every one of these for years. First, it gave me a huge contact list of activists throughout the Portland metro area of all ideological stripes relating to any issue focus. Any of those people I could invite to come into my classrooms. And by the way, if politically the program came under siege, all of those people I could encourage to write and communicate to my college to bring pressure upon them to back off. You see the politics of it. Another paper that I used was called a forgiveness paper. The forgiveness paper was based upon Simon Wiesenthal's book, The Sunflower, which I hardly encourage you to read. It's a very short book, and it details Wiesenthal's personal experience as a Jew in several different concentration camps during World War II, where he struggles with forgiveness. How can we forgive the SS guards? How can we forgive the Nazis? Should we forgive the Nazis? Should we forgive ourselves for our own action or inaction that has created these circumstances that we find ourselves in? So I hope that your courses are not all just fun and games, but encourage serious soul searching and reflection on the part of your students, because that develops more than content, intellectual intelligence and awareness. It can kind of help cultivate emotional intelligence and awareness, which I think is a foundation for any kind of activism. And structurally, it's nice to have a nice certificate award. You know, this isn't in color, but it's nice. And this person got a level 1 PAX award with 18 credits in 2012. Of course, we keep track of who receives awards on any level. These also become people we need to keep in touch with, organized with, for the purpose of future speakers as well as political involvement. Around 2000, we created a community service and action seminar. This is fully 10 years into the program. We cross-listed it with psychology, poli-sci, and soc. It was often team taught, and it required an internship. So the students would sign up for 3 credits. 2 credits would, well, actually 1 credit would go for coming together once a week. The 15 or 20 students placed in different programs to share with themselves their experience. So it was kind of a collective experience. And then 2 credit hours was actually in the field, engaged in a total of 80 hours of service in a quarter system. So that's significant. That's about 8 hours a week of actual involvement in the field, working in a soup kitchen, working on a political campaign, perhaps serving in the office of the mayor of Portland. A variety of different possibilities in terms of engagement. Get involved. make a difference, be effective. We found out that we couldn't really require this seminar as a completion for any of our program awards because it created a bottleneck. We strongly encouraged it, but the seminar could only be offered once a term for staffing reasons. And we had a lot more people who could not make that particular time and place for the seminar. So I encourage you to build in flexibility even as you're trying to be creative. We strongly promoted work and learn in your community. And even if you couldn't be in the seminar, we actively encouraged people to engage in what we called cooperative education. At Portland Community College, you can still get 1 credit for a 40-hour placement. That's 4 hours a week, 10 weeks. You can get 2 credits for an 80-hour placement, 3 credits for a 120-hour placement. And you can be very, very creative with using this cooperative education. For example, I had one of our Peace and Conflict Studies students spend an entire term, 10 weeks, in Vietnam. And they got 12 credit hours for working with a non-governmental organization working with women in Hanoi. And then I set up a 4 credit independent study, which basically allowed them to read in preparation for their experience and write a paper relating to their experience, which we could give credit for. So I encourage you to make use of flexibility, even if you don't require it. Okay, I'm seeing I have about 11 minutes, which is short time. So I'll go quickly here, but I'm a big advocate of public relations, right? And I mentioned how for 15 years, we had a once a week, every week, public event in a public space relating to peace issues, sponsored by the Peace and Conflict Studies program. Here's an early one in 2000. US-led globalization, future fascism? I included an Iranian faculty person from the economic department. I facilitated. And of course, in the poster itself, we educated. And well, fascism is often defined as a corporate state, a state organized like a corporation, though it could also be a corporation with the powers of a state. So even in the advertising, we were seeking to provide information to the public. And that topic, I think, is very timely today, sadly, over 20 years later. We would have particular focuses, of course, on war and peace. Kathy Kelly, who is out of Chicago, has now been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 4 times. When she was nominated the first time, it was for violating sanctions in Iraq, illegally going back to Iraq with medical and other supplies. She's a personal friend of the family, and so she happened to be in Portland when she was waiting news of whether she would win the first time around, and she didn't. So I had a program for her. Kathy Kelly, in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. Costs of war, the price of peace. You take advantage of the speakers and resources that you have. And those who come from out of town, my goodness. Arun Gandhi, great-grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. Actually, grandson, only grandson. He came to town. He was actually a featured speaker at Pacific University, which is nearby in the Portland metro area. I got Arun Gandhi to come to Portland Community College. We had lunch with him with our Peace and Conflict Studies core faculty and students. I think he enjoyed himself. In South Africa, way back in 1972, I had spent time with his mother, Gandhi's daughter-in-law, who was still alive at that time at Phoenix Settlement outside of Durban. So again, you develop your relationships, and in this case, Arun Gandhi was quite a draw. He had over 1,000 people in his audience when he came to Portland. Sometimes we got to be overtly political. The Pacific Green Party of Oregon needed to have a space. The Peace and Conflict Studies program sponsored them to have a space on one campus for free. It was an arrangement we could make. If we were a sponsor of the program, they could have their event. They had a all-day Saturday campaign school. I helped to organize it. Those who came and took advantage of that campaign school included 3 people who later ran for the Seattle City Council and won, which makes the Seattle City Council one of the most progressive, radical city councils in the United States. So I'm not against being fairly political. It's a world that we're seeking to change for the better, not just an academic program that I'm promoting. I don't have time for this, but we experienced a number of problems in the 2000s, including an issue of institutional consolidations. At one point, we were threatened effectively. Well, I think all focus awards should be only 18 credits. So Michael and the Peace and Conflict Studies Committee, you get rid of your 30 credit program, get rid of your 45 credit program. We need to standardize everything. I organized a pushback to that. It required about all the organizing I could provide. And we resisted that institutional threat at that point in time, and we kept our programs intact. One of the last free speech forums we had in 2015, just before I had to run for the board of directors, was Blue on Black violence. I can't breathe. Teresa Rayford was the primary organizer for a group called Don't Shoot Portland. She had been banned by Portland Community College from speaking on campus. She was considered herself personally a security threat. I sponsored her to speak at one of our forums, and this was advertised for the student union. The campus administration said, no, you can't do that. She can't provide $1 million worth of insurance policy. I don't know how many people could do that. And so when she was successfully stopped from being on campus, I organized her event on the sidewalk about 3 feet from campus, with the audience being on campus and her being on the sidewalk. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are open to being that confrontational with your own administration. But this helped build the program, build interest. And the program itself was so entrenched at that point that it was really could not be touched as a program. Now, things are evolving. We have 3 to 4 minutes now. College that fits your life. Okay. That's a picture of one campus at Portland Community College. I would say today, a very serious threat to our program and potentially a threat to programs elsewhere in the country is something called the Guided Pathways Movement. I'm aware of this because it is being implemented at PCC, largely in spite of the questions I've raised about it. I will read this briefly. This is part of a 5-page proposal that I made to Fulbright to return to India a year from now. I'm proposing to study educational philosophies, comparing Gandhi's philosophy with educational pathways and other reform movements. But this will give you an idea if you haven't heard of this before. Guided Pathways reflects a growing reform movement impacting community colleges throughout the United States. It seeks to respond to both increasing costs associated with post-secondary education and the fact that fewer than 25% of college students complete a certificate or 2-year degree within 3 years. Bolstered by the Sloan Foundation grants, launching the Community College Research Center in 1996, and with support from the Association of Community College Trustees, from the Gates Foundation, which was $4 million in 2012. This movement is now in over 300 community colleges throughout the United States. It consists of creating roadmaps for new students. Each roadmap clusters similar majors into meta majors, and it gets counselors to help them transfer credits to four-year institutions with few excess units. In 2015, my board voted to implement YES for student success, not knowing that YES would be interpreted later as saying yes to career pathways. Now, this is still pretty abstract to you. But at PCC, this is what is on our website now. The 6 pathways are arts, humanities, communication design, healthcare, emergency professions, business and entrepreneurship, construction, manufacturing, technology, transportation, science, technology, engineering, math, public service education, and social sciences. Notice that only 2, possibly 3 of those 6 are liberal arts. Science can be considered part of liberal arts, but it's connected with engineering. It's a movement which is emphasizing far more the jobs ready, career technical education opportunities, de-emphasizing college transfer. And where in those 6 categories do you think peace and conflict studies would fit? Where would women's studies fit? Where would environmental studies fit? They don't. In other words, I'm very concerned as a trustee that it's not far down the road, unless we make a place for these programs within a new structure, that structure itself will kill the programs. At this point, I'm out of time. And
Michael, I'm going to pick up on the last thing you talked about, but before I do that, I'm going to come back to the pathways question, because I do want to ask about that. But I want you to talk a little bit about your Fulbright in 2010 in India. Talk about, kind of what propelled you to do that, because once again, community college faculty, so few get Fulbrights. About that.
Well, your questions, what compelled me was personal. My doctoral dissertation was a comparison of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. That was rooted in a 1971-72 Watson Foundation Fellowship, which took me to India for 6 months
interviewing people who had known Gandhi.
Hmm.
And so my impulse for the Fulbright to teach Gandhi in India, which is what I did, was personal.
Mhm.
And clearly the political side, I think very politically, was a consciousness from other trips to India that Gandhi was very little understood within his home country.
Mhm.
And I felt a need to encourage students and others to see Gandhi as more than the only face on all of their currency.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, as a community college person, I was an oddball. And a couple of kind of pieces of information for you, if you might be interested in going for a Fulbright. There is a structural bias in the Fulbright organization against community colleges, very clearly.
Mhm.
Of 60 Fulbrighters who went to India, I was the only one from a community college background,
Mm.
1 out of 60. They insisted then, and I think they still do, that you must have a terminal degree, so you need a PhD. That hurts a lot of community college applicants. An MFA, if you're into the arts, is sufficient. That's a terminal degree. A key thing, though, was they wanted to have publications. And where is there really encouragement for publishing at the community college level? Our emphasis is upon teaching. We have very little time for publishing. I did it on my own, including a major text comparing Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Third, though, they required graduate teaching experience.
Mhm.
Whoa! Well, thank heavens that I had developed these relationships with other institutions through my organizing for peace and conflict studies. So I taught 3 graduate level seminars at Portland State University, not because I wanted to, because it needed to be on my resume to qualify for me to apply for the Fulbright.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was okay teaching experience, but I didn't care about it. It wasn't a matter of ego. It was a matter of checking boxes
Yeah. Yeah.
to
You
be
know,
able.
I was going to say is I also went on a Fulbright when I was in community college, and you're right in what you're saying about the limitations. I mean, there are some 800. So realize there are about 8 different Fulbright programs, and what Michael's talking about and what I'm talking about is the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program, where basically academics go overseas and teach. Of course, there's a Fulbright student program where students go overseas, and generally speaking, they're English teaching assistants, ETAs. And then there's Fulbright Hayes, which is run by the Department of Education, not by the Department of State. And then, of course, there are inbound Fulbrighters, which are about a different age program. So it's very complicated. But overall, and I've made this case to Educational and Cultural Affairs because I know people there, and I'm very active in the National Fulbright Association, which is just an alumni association, that there is a disproportionate, or malapportioned number of community college faculty that go. Out of 800, generally maybe 1%, 2% of that, maybe 8 to 10 will be from community colleges. And when community colleges are teaching 46% of US undergraduates, there's something amiss there, right? And particularly when community college students tend to be first generation college, the most diverse. To use the old metaphor, when you first come off the boat, where do you go to school? You go to community college. And so there's so many different compelling reasons that experience of faculty need to come back to students. But part of the challenge, I will say, is that even within community college structures, it's problematic. And so it's not just Education, Cultural Affairs and the State Department, it's community colleges itself don't make it work. And the reason is the most obvious reason is that community college faculty teach so much. when you're teaching 5 courses a semester and you say, I'm going to go into Fulbright for 6 months or a year, who's going to cover my classes? That's not so easy accomplished. If you're in a 4-year institution where you're teaching 2 and 3, 2, 1, 3, another, whatever it is, they can figure that out, right? And so it becomes much more difficult there. So there's a lot of structural things that nobody seems to have been able to tease out easily, and it's disappointing, but you're right there, Michael.
Well, just on this line, there was the internal structural problem. I managed to get a 1-term sabbatical, which is easy at community college for me. I hadn't taken a sabbatical in 20 years, so it was pretty easy. And I also then switched 1 term teaching summer instead of fall.
Yeah.
And so that gave me then 2 terms
So you had
effective.
Yeah, you had to create a lot of workarounds. That's what you
I
had to do.
had to work around the system
Yeah.
in turn, and it's still a challenge. I put in 150 hours in the month of August creating this new Fulbright proposal. I'm kind of going for the big kahuna. In India, they have one and only one Distinguished Scholar Award.
Okay.
Okay. They've never given that to a community college person.
Good luck. Yeah.
Well, it's going to take luck, but I think
Luck is not what you need. You have the credentials, you have what's necessary,
Yeah.
right?
And oftentimes Fulbright favors those who are already famous.
Yeah.
In my older years now, I have a pretty impressive resume. I'm glad they don't have an interview because I probably will blow it. But on paper, I'm impressive, and I'm hoping to crack that nut.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going back basically to try to protect Gandhian studies programs from the encroachment of a neo-fascist Hindu nationalist government that is seeking to subvert those programs.
Yeah.
So here I'm not going for ego, I'm going for politics again. I'm trying to protect Gandhi studies in India from being destroyed.
Yeah. So I want to double back to what you were talking about before and the guided pathways, but having a bigger conversation about this and tell you where my launching point is. And I want to bring everybody in. And so let's just keep talking and see where this is go with the idea of ending up at 2 if people need to walk up. So I'll ask you a question and then I'll let other people want to jump in and ask each other questions. And then if that kind of dies out, then I'll pose some questions. I was having breakfast with my wife this morning, and my wife, most of you probably know, she teaches at Montgomery College. She teaches the same school that Tulin and Nancy have retired from. Nancy, have you retired? I couldn't remember if you retired or not. She teaches nursing, so she's full-time faculty in the nursing program. So she teaches on the Tacoma Park campus. And one of the things that we always talk about is the fact that nursing curriculum has no room for anything. No room for the social sciences, no room for the humanities. There's a little bit here and there, smidgens here and there, but they're really not enough to provide that kind of humanistic perspective or social science perspective that healthcare workers need. Like, at a minimum, everybody who works in health science should take introduction to sociology. I don't know if they do. And she was saying that it also prohibits her own students from engaging in campus. So she went to campus today because, I don't know, you might know this, Tulin, they're planting a butterfly garden at the Rockville campus. And she's part of the green team. So there's a committee and she's going, and all this is being led by a student. And the student actually is a student at Montgomery College. She's studying political science or something like that. And she's got time. I mean, she's really kind of engaged in campus life and doing that kind of thing because she's in the social sciences. But it brought back to the issue that students who are not in those kind of fields that are heavily technical don't have the chance to have that kind of experience in community college, and then don't benefit from these other things that, heading the green team and planting the butterfly garden, which I think is pretty important. So this is kind of a broader look at what you're raising, Michael, as an issue, right? If you think about it and how other people are seeing that. I mean, Michael, what do you think? Is that Is that what you're seeing?
I already know I've talked too much.
Okay, let me ask, Tulin, you've got your mic off. What do you think?
Well, a lot of what Michael said resonates with me. He lived in South Africa. I had a Fulbright grant to go to South Africa. And I studied actually with people who did the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that was an epiphany for me. That is what started my interest in peace and conflict resolution
Mhm.
studies. And like you, I have gray hair, but otherwise, I also created the first course for peace and justice studies at Montgomery College, Introduction to Peace and Justice Studies. Like you, the concept of forgiveness, particularly the way that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission developed it in South Africa, was an inspiration for me. So I did develop actually when we used to have honors courses, a course in the concepts of forgiveness and a course in concepts of social justice. I was a philosophy professor, so my approach was philosophic. Like you, I brought many speakers to Montgomery College. Arul Gandhi was one of our guests, and also the daughter of Mpo Tutu, of Desmond Tutu. Her name is Mpo Tutu. She used to be in this area. She also came to our college. And the name is out of it because I'm an old person too. The Green Party presidential candidate.
What year?
Who?
What year? The only one I know is Ralph Nader, but what year?
Yeah,
Oh.
Ralph Nader.
Ralph
Nader.
Nader? Okay.
Yes, he came to Montgomery College.
Okay.
Every year at Montgomery College, we used to celebrate the International Peace Day. And in the course that I taught, one thing that I did was to also engage students in current events. So I would give them my signature assignment used to be Current Events News Project
Mhm,
to
mhm.
get them to read respectable newspapers, whether they be online or in paper, and relate that to what they were studying.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also encountered administrative difficulties because our administrator was interested in how many people enrolled for the class. So, as a philosophy professor, introduction to philosophy is always full. But introduction to peace and justice studies was not always full. And
Mhm.
it was actually a struggle to let the administrators run that class every semester. But I'm heartened these days because even though I'm retired, a colleague of mine is trying to get general education accreditation for the course. I hope she succeeds.
Oh, that's great, Tulin.
I might just want to reemphasize to offer the core course only in philosophy with declining enrollments is tough, but we had it cross-listed.
Mhm.
And so when you have the capacity to have the student get credit for it in political science, sociology, and perhaps philosophy also, and have instructors from those three disciplines all able to teach the course, so you triple the number of faculty that can teach the
When I
you
developed it,
the
it
increased
was
enrollment. And we've always had full enrollments in that core course, which made it beyond administrative reproach.
And I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond to that idea, but I don't want to get too into the weeds because I want to bring other people in the conversation. But when I proposed, I had a peace and conflict course also, and Tulin might not remember this, or Nancy, but I taught for 10 years at Harford Community College up in Harford County, and I proposed it, and I started off by listing interdisciplinary, and the curriculum committee went livid. Not the committee, but the director of the history. I mean, all the various programs were saying, well, how much of this and that and this and that you have in there? And so I was like negotiating this out. And then somebody came to my rescue and they said, David, we have this designation that nobody ever uses called interdisciplinary studies. And we actually have no courses in that right now. And interdisciplinary studies will transfer. I mean, our big transfer was like Towson University, University of Maryland, and it'll transfer because there's a way of making it gen ed, right? Because there's nothing in there right now. So we could easily make it gen ed. I said, thank you. You just saved my course. So we pass it as interdisciplinary studies, made it gen ed because there was like a 6-credit gen ed in interdisciplinary studies that could transfer. So yeah, it wasn't so easy where I was than where you were, Michael. It's more of the circumstance that Tulin deals with because we were in the same state system.
Well, actually, to have a course get through curriculum, we have to have letters of acceptance from other institutions in Maryland who say, yes, we will transfer this course.
Right.
It is, I think to make it interdisciplinary is a brilliant idea. The course I developed was a philosophy course. It was philosophy 209 because that's what I know.
So let's go a little broader because I don't want the conversation to be with us 3 elder dogs, not old dogs, mature dogs. I want everybody else to be in the conversation. So there are other people here also and get their take on either what we've been talking about with Michael, other things. I mean, what's kind of even just what's the takeaway of the last couple of weekends? What are you taking away? We've got some students in the room also. That is, what will you take away in particular to what's going on? What are some follow-ups you'd like to see? How would you like to continue to work with us? Whatever it is. And if I don't hear anything, I might point to people. I don't like to do that, but I will. So any thoughts for anybody? Any takeaways or anything that anybody raised? And somebody besides Tulin, myself, and Michael talking would be great. Just open your mic. There's not a lot of us here. See, then I have to pick on people.
Well, I don't mean to
Go ahead,
monopolize
Nancy. Yes. Yeah.
academic college, but what I was hoping was I know there are other faculty here, and I'm trying to represent this small group of, as I look at it, I've realized it's now turned out to be retirees and faculty, and it's only students in the sense that 2 of us retirees are taking classes. But what I'd like to know from faculty is if you had a group that could support your class, like what we've done is we've given small stipends to outstanding students who faculty identify. And what we'd like to do is have speakers, but so far it seems like we don't quite know who we want to have.
Mm.
And maybe, as you know, because we're right next to Washington, D.C., for example, they started a speaker series called Athenaeum Symposia. And at the beginning, I think they had little or no budget and took advantage of getting a lot of people from the government who are already paid and aren't allowed to accept any money.
I spoke at it.
Yeah, I think you may have been one of those. So we'd like to have speakers. It was amazing to me when Tulin arranged it to have Arun Gandhi come. See, at one point we had a guy whose uncle died and left him money, and he gave $10,000. Just no bureaucracy, no paperwork, like just here's the money. And the grassroots group at the time made it last like 3 years. With that, they had different speakers because, as you know, you can go to different departments and get a little money here. Do you want to be a co-sponsor here? Do you want to be a co-sponsor there? So we could leverage, we don't have a lot of funds, but we could leverage what we have. But I don't think we know, I don't think the 4, well, what do we have? 3 retirees, a semi-retiree who's still teaching 1 class. I haven't necessarily heard a lot of suggestions about who we should try to get.
I'm going to pose this to Paul because Paul is in a very developed peace and conflict program in a community college. And they've been able to do that. And so, I mean, they have a foundation. I mean, don't go look at PJI at Valencia unless you want to have tremendous feeling of envy. Okay. Be prepared for that when you go. But Paul, what would you suggest to Nancy?
I'm too humble for that kind of talk. I don't know. That's Rachel's area where she's just like, oh yes, let me tell you, she just perks up. I'm actually having lunch with her just after this, but yeah, I mean, there's a pretty good relationship that we have with our community, with the college too, our administration, but with the community. We have an advisory board, so that's made up of people from our business community, from humanitarian efforts, municipalities, religious community, you name it. So there's private donations that we get, as well as money from the college, and we do have a separate foundation, Valencia Foundation, that can also, or has also, helped out. So I don't know how to exactly answer it, but it's taken, Michael mentioned 40 years. We've only been at it for maybe 15, and a lot of that was as an initiative. We've only been an institute in the last maybe 5 years, going on 6 years. So I think we're still learning how to do all of this. And thank you so much, David, for all the praise. It really is nice. So I don't know exactly how to answer it. I think Rachel would do it. Again, I'm always deferring to Rachel, but I just teach the Peace Studies course. I don't know if there's any questions. I'll be happy to answer them, but I don't know if that helps.
May I butt in here,
Go ahead,
David?
absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
David, some time ago, you helped me get the last grant from the USIP,
Mhm.
which I used to bring in speakers. I think Nancy might be interested also in knowing how we could get grants in order to bring in speakers.
That program at USIP went for 2 years. And
I
it
know
was-
that's finished.
I was furious when it went away. I was no longer at USIP at that point.
I know, but you helped me a lot. So are there other sources from which Montgomery College, for example, could get grants in order to bring speakers?
There are a lot of small foundations out there. Because I'm also president of an NGO, a non-government organization, does humanitarian education. It's a 501c3. We've looked for grant money, big money, large money, kind of all over. And it takes a bit of tenacity. And that's why, look, every community college has got their grants person, right? Has got an office that does that.
Mhm.
They don't. And I would bring them on board, because they're going to be a lot more sophisticated in knowing and also being able to write a grant. It's not just knowing where to go. You don't write a grant, you develop a relationship with the organization. Like, you call them and you say, this is something you might or might not do, then you apply for it. So it's a lot of nurturing the relationship, and that often I can give all kinds of advice, but I don't know. Paul, you must have a grant person where you are at Valencia.
Yeah, we do. We have a very good grants office. Actually, a couple of years ago, we got a grant when the USIP grant was a matching grant to bring in Carl Wilkins.
It's the same grant that Tulin got.
Yeah.
I reviewed those. I got to tell you, I reviewed those grants.
Did you?
I left USIP. I was asked to review the grants from the community colleges. You guys know this. And I said, yes, Valencia. Yes, Montgomery College. Because I knew what you guys were doing. Yeah.
That's funny, because I was just looking on our PGI website. You're still listed as being at the USIP. So we're going to have to change that.
I left in 2013.
Yeah, but we've gotten grants from the Florida Humanities Council. They helped us out with the Teachers Academy that we have. But now Penny Viegas, who I mentioned maybe 2 weeks ago, who had just passed, she donated a bunch of money. So that's now where the money comes from for the Teachers Academy. I mean, but yeah, relationships. You mentioned relationships. We have built relationships over the years with so many people, and we're trusted, in that relationship, in the work that we're doing, the kind of workshops we offer. I mean, whatever it is. Our county government, our city, the mayor, Buddy Dyer here in Orlando, they're all on board with us. So they help us in so many different ways, financially, everything else.
I will say, and I'll stop and then I'm going to get more people involved. I'll say one thing. The key to, there are a lot of keys to Valencia's success, but one of the keys is diffusion among lots of different people. Even though Rachel Allen is the lead or the director, she has, or the initiative has enfranchised so many people. Often where peace and conflict programs have failed at community colleges because there's one guy or one gal or one person who runs it and they retire and then it goes away because they have not even been able to, or they haven't been asked, or they haven't like spread it around so that if one day Rachel Allen decides to do something else, Paul, there will be some other way of sustaining it. And that's at the key. And that's so hard in community colleges because when you're already teaching 5 courses and you got to get release time. Release time is the golden nugget in community colleges, or reassign time. And no one ever wants to give it to anybody. But if you can get some reassigned time for 3 hours or whatever to do something, that's when you do it. But if you can't get that, then you're doing it on your own dime, which you can do, but it's just not how it should be operating.